Initial and continuing education. Engineer Certification Reference Guide, Federal Road Administration, revised August 2000. Initial continuing education. Railroad program submission must continue, and the information concerned with the railroad program of the training of the previously certified local engineers. Appendix B, Section 3, the trained person and not personally effective, the certified with Appendix B, Section 5, 240, 123B for the provided railroad latitude, specifically subject with the manager to cover the duration of the training with the method of presenting of the information, frequency with which of the training will be provided with the railroad program submission must contain the information, in detail of the permanent evaluation, effective evaluation railroad training program, including with the training environment employed, for example, the use of the classroom, the use of the computer-based training, the use of simulator, use of film, slide, presentation, use of on-job training with the aspect of the program, voluntary and mandatory. Each of the railroad must designate a program to address both the law of the retention knowledge of the change circumstances. For example, engineers need to have their fundamental knowledge of the train operation refreshed periodically, including the interval between the attendance as such of the training and nature of the methods of the training. Appendix B, Part 240. Railroad program submission. Railroad program shall state with whether it accepts the responsibility for the training its student engineers conducted itself, or were employed at other entity. Will recertify only engineers previously certified by the other railroads through railroad submission. Shall state with the railroad election either to accept the responsible the training student engineer thereby own with the operating authority of railroad and initially certify a person over the engineer with appropriate class of service. To recertify only engineer previously certified at other railroads. The railroad election accept the responsible for the training the student engineer with the state with the submission with whether it will conduct the training program employed with the training program conducted by some of the other entity with the behalf adopted the ratified by the railroad. Per Appendix B of the railroad plan to accept the responsibility for the initial training, the experienced engineers may authorize another railroad of the non-railroad entity to perform actual training efforts. If the authorized railroad may submit the training program developed by the authorized trainer, but the authorized railroad remains responsible for the assuring of the other that such of the training providing and adhere with the training program submitted. Initial education. Initial training composed of the classroom skill with the performance familiarization physical characteristics include both skills, knowledge, and performance skill testing conducted under the supervision of the qualified class instructor. Criteria for initial continuing education. Each of the railroad program shall include with the criteria procedure for implementing initial continuing education. Railroad shall the electives train the previously untrained person to meet with the locomotive engineer shall provide with initial training such as the minimum composed classroom skill, performance familiarization with the physical characteristic components of both knowledge and performance skill testing conducted under supervision of qualified class instructor. Continued. Initial education P4 periods of the duration effective to cover the personal safety of the operating rules, equipment of the train handling, familiarization, federal regulations, performance skill under supervision, instructor, and engineer, student, engineer, control for the significant time operates variety of trains. It's subdivided in segments perform periods with the appropriate duration effectively over the subject matter area of the personal safety of the railroad operating rules, mechanical condition, equipment training, handling, procedure using, including locomotive and train braking, system familiarization, physical characters, including train handling, compliance with federal regulations, conduct with the skills of the components shall be under supervision, qualified instructor and engineer located with the same compartment with the control compartment whenever possible. Place the student engineer as control of the locomotive for a significant portion of the time. The permanent students experience whatever variety of types of trains normally operated by the railroad. Non-railroad contractor. Section 5 of the Appendix B make the provision training company for the existence of the railroad to use them. The outside contractor describing the railroad plan submission. The actual certification must be done by the railroad. Part 240-103 permits for the railroad to employ with the training program conducted with some of the other entity on behalf of the initial student training with Appendix B with the Part 240 of Section 5 of the submission of the training with the testing evaluation person not previously certified state with a railroad of plans to accept the responsibility of the initial training with the engineer may authorize another railroad or non-railroad entity from the actual training after the authorized railroad may submit with the training program developed by the authorized trainer, but the authorizing railroad remains responsible for assuring that the other such of the other provided to adhere with the program is submitted with the railroad's electively rely on other entities conducting training away from the railroad's own trackage must indicate how the students will provide with the required familiarization physical characteristics of the trackage. Some of the Class 1 railroads offering service over the engineer training, particularly on simulators. Alright, non-railroad contractor. Contractors may offer the railroad's temporary engineer, but they can also offer a person with experience with testing with them for their knowledge, vision, hearing, and initial continuing education, performance skills, and monitoring. Contractor may check with the motor vehicle with the data operating with the alcohol and drug compliance. Technical Bulletin Op. 9733 was issued on December 13, 1995. It stated that numerous inquiries have been regarding the use of the outside contractor certification purpose of the temporary use of third-party engineers during the work and stop the use of the service continuation engineering during the recent major dispute has raised many questions. Policy Section 5 of the Appendix B of the regulation provision for the training company to exist for the service of the railroad to use the company for the actual certification must be done by railroad. Use an outside contractor, however, the contractor will be used described in the railroad's plan submission. Contractors with the other temporary engineers, much like the temporary employee with the other fields of work, are of the certainly acceptable business under Part 240 of the problems raised with the outside contractors involved with the fact only with the railroad qualified with the locomotive engineer under Part 240. However, a contractor by use of the railroad offering a person with experience with the testing of the person with the knowledge and certain required criteria for completing some of the other required background check. For example, the contractor may check for the prior safety conduct of the motor vehicle operator operating and continuing paid next to Op. 9733. Non-railroad contractor railroads remain liable for the compliance. Temporary engineer can be certified with the multiple railroads have multiple railroad issued certificates. Engineer would have to remain current on each issuing railroad annual monitoring testing. Railroad must maintain required records. Rules compliance data with the data substance abuse with the discipline with the alcohol drug rules complying with the addition of contractors making sure with the complying with the criteria of the vision hearing acute the initial continuation testing knowledge the examination skill performance mutual monitoring operational performance. Railroad must continue with the maintenance for the record requirements imposed with the regulation when the railroad are free to contract with these contractors. The railroads remain liable for the compliance with the regulation. One or more of the temporary engineers employed with the certification certified with the multiple railroads require multiple certificates. Each certificate would have to be reissued by the railroad, not by the contractor. Non-railroad entity. For each certificate to remain valid, the certificate holder would have to remain current on the issuing railroad. Vice versa by the annual check ride or operational tests. Under ordinary circumstances, the railroad would minimum 2 certified locomotive engineers. Each locomotive engineer could have the use to perform a monitoring check rides for on the other. However, by using contractor short line have achieved compliance without employing 2 certified locomotive engineers. For example, short line railroads, 1 certified engineer shall contract with the certification services shall be conduct all the tests continued Op. 9733. Non-railroad contractors, short line railroad, 1 certified with the engineer should contract with such that the non-railroad contractor could conduct the railroad annual check ride with the short line railroad engineers along with the railroad engineer did the same for the other certified engineer employed by the contractor, and check with the railroad engineer as well as the certification service employee with the certification service employee can conduct a required annual check ride with the certification service employees. Railroad must continue to meet the maintenance records requirements imposed by this regulation. Or a student engineer certified as a student engineer after hearing vision tests. A student engineer may be later certified as an engineer if it completes the training program knowledge and performance skill of the motor vehicle operating rules alcohol drug test within 2-year period. Railroad may certify a person as a student engineer after determining when the person meets the vision and hearing acuity standards. The 240-121 railroad may subsequently certify the student engineer as either the locomotive servicing engineer, train servicing engineer with the further review of the visual hearing acuity provided within determines the person successfully completed the training program that complied with the Part 240-123 knowledge and skills of performance testing. The person meets the eligibility requirements 240-109 prior safety daily conduct motor vehicle with the operating rule compliance 240-119 alcohol drug compliance in a period not more than 24 hours is elapsed since the student engineering certificate was issued. Note, see page 27 of the application tab of the reference guide for further information for the student engineers. Initial education. Railroad must have the written documentation that the person completed with the training program to demonstrate that his knowledge and skills and with achievement the passing grade is familiar with physical characteristics of the railroad as determined by the qualified designated supervisor locomotive engineer. Alright, procedures for the making the determination on completion of the training program. Each various required with the initial assurance of the issuance of the certification. Any of the person trained local the certificate engineer shall determine if the person have the accordance with the requirement of 240-123 for the knowledge and skill of the chief of the operator locomotive with the training of the permit. Must be the demand class for the type of the certificate the permanent person will be permitted to perform. To make a determination, railroad shall have the written documentation showing that the person completed for the training program with the complied with the 240-123. Person demonstrated the knowledge and skills of having achieving the passing grade under the testing evaluation procedure for the training program, and qualified designated supervisor locomotive engineer has determined the person is familiar with the physical character of the railroad and pertinent segments. Initial training recommended guidelines, safety Safety, new operating rules, mechanisms, air brake tests, train handling, azimuth, emergency, federal regulations. Whenever the railroad asks for the guideline initial training program, the FRA refers to the proposed rule, the FRA Federal Register 1289, Volume 54, Number 236, pages 50930. Proposed rule, Category A, train service, and Category C, locomotive service engineers indicate minimum duration for training as followed with the personal safety, operating mechanism, air brake testing, train handling, federal railroad regulation. Other federal regulations, including locomotive inspection, hours of service, dog alcohol, radio procedures, administrative matters, 8 hours each class service to hold new hires for current employees, and their guidelines only are not. These are the guidelines only and not enforceable. Initial training, recommended guidelines, performance skills, 1 hour training with the Type 1 simulator content with the 5 hours total of the train operating experience, 1 hour of the training with Type 2 simulator content with 2 hours of the training operating expense, 3 round trips over the entire territory. Whenever the railroad asks for the guideline initial training program, the FRA refers them to the proposed rule for FRA 1289, Volume 54, Number 236, page 50930. 1. Proposed rule guideline with a minimum duration, total actual train operation, combined actual number simulator operation as 480 hours of training service engineer, 60 hours the locomotive service engineer of the training simulator substituted with a portion of the actual train operation experience with the teaching and performance skills. Each of the two will give the minimum period actual train operation with 240 hours Type 1 simulator, 360 hours Type 2 simulator of the train service engineer, 30 hours of Type 1 simulator, 60 hours of Type 2 simulator locomotive service engineers. This is 1 hour of training Type 1 simulator can be counted as up to 5 hours of total train operation experience. 1 hour of training on a Type 2 simulator could be counted up to as 2 hours of total train operation experience. Proposed rule require for the two engineers to make at least 3 round trips over the entire authorized territory. Guidelines only not enforceable. Alright, continuing education to maintain with the necessary skill with an ability with the personal safety, operation, rural practice with the mechanical addition of equipment, the train including familiarity with physical character determined by the designated supervisor, locomotive engineer, relevant federal safety rules. Bureau shall provide with a continuing education certified locomotive engineer and ensure that the job of the engineer maintain with the necessary knowledge of the skills, ability, concerned with the personal safety, operating, rule of the practice, mechanical addition, including the methods of the safety, train handling, and familiarity with the physical character with the determined with the qualified designated supervisor, locomotive engineer, relevant and federal safety rules. Designated supervisor or locomotive engineer participate with the continuing education program at the minimum estimate of the same of the regular engineer. The designated supervisor and locomotive engineer shall take with the same of the rules of the extent. Examine the step of the special officer's examination. There is no requirement that the railroad conduct its training at a determined interval with unspecified durations. Designating of the program of the railroad must ensure that the engineers are kept and involved with the change of the new and amended with the guidance provided with the general order, special instruction amendments of the book of the rules, change of the curve of the physical characteristics of the territory, which of the engineers required to be familiar with the introduction of the new technology. Railroad must also provide with the program to ensure each engineer stays familiar with the existing rules, procedures learned years ago, as well as physical characteristics unused in a significant period. Familiar with physical characteristics. For initial continuation of the railroad shall describe the method of familiarizing the engineers with the new territory of the program submission, starting up with the new railroad, starting operations over newly and acquired railroad lines, reopening along unused routes. Familiar with physical characters of the territory, pursuing with the initial continuing education, person with the acquired familiarity, physical character of the territory, follow with the method of the specific condition, with include with the description each of the methods are met with the method of the railroad, familiarizing the engineers. The new territory will start up with the new railroad, starting operations over the newly acquired rail lines, reopening of the unused routes shall be described in the railroad's locomotive engineering qualification program required within Part 240 as submitted in accordance with the procedures described in Appendix B for the Part 240. If the owner of the railroad being transferred from one company to another, engineer of the acquiring company with the receipt of the familiarization training with the selling the company prior to the acquiring railroad commencing operations, or familiar with physical characteristics. If the ownership of the transferred engineers acquired railroad may receive the familiarization training from the selling company prior to the commencing operation of the method to high rail with the light locomotive trips per program submission. 2. Failing to obtain the familiarization training with the previously owned with the reopening of the new line, reopening of the unused route will require the engineer to obtain familiarization through other methods. Simple methods of obtaining familiarization include with the high rail trip with the initial light with the locomotive trips in compliance with what specified with the railroad locomotive the engineer qualification program according to the Part 240 submitted with the corner of the procedures prescribed in Appendix B of the Part 240. Per Expended B, the railroad must have the plan for the familiarization training addresses with the question of how long a person can be absent with the before needing more educational or other threshold of the reach of how the acquire the needed education. Railroad programs must address how the railroad responds for the change of the significant change of the operation, include for the alteration territory engineers for the authorized to operate over the railroad, elect for the rely on the other entities, conduct for the training way with the railroad's own trackage, must indicate how the student will provide with the required familiarization with the physical characters for the trackage. 240-123D, Appendix B. Territorial qualification question 1. What are the territorial qualification requirements of the railroad affiliates to qualify for the previously untrained person to be a locomotive engineer? Question 1. What are the territorial qualification requirements of the railroad to elect with qualify for the previously untrained person to be a locomotive engineer? Answer. Training requirement of the previously untrained person listed within 240-123C with both the knowledge and testing skill of the performance tests must be passed. Furthermore, the railroad supervisor must have a certain determination for a person to be considered qualified, thus safe to operate over a particular territory. Some manner training and testing qualification requirements include training C240-123C with the FRA approved of the program prepared for the railroad pursuant to the 240-103 testing with the engineer should for the most part of the written knowledge testing of the physical characteristics of the territory described in the 240-125C4 physical characteristics knowledge question needed to be wrote specifically limiting such test generic questioning will not be sufficient. Moreover, the testing of the person authorized to operate over the multiple rounds of the personal knowledge concerning each of the routes needed to be examined. Qualifying a designated supervisor locomotive engineer must be qualified on the territory must determine in writing of the engineer is familiar with the physical characters of the railroad in pertinent segments pursuant to Territorial question 2. What are the requirements when the railroad wishes for the qualified certified engineer over the territory in which the engineer has never operated? What are the requirements of the regulation of the railroad wishes for the certified engineer over the territory in which the engineer has never operated? The answer is term qualified defined in 1999 amendments for the meaning of the person who over the past all of the appropriate training for the testing program required for the railroad part 240 who therefore has actual knowledge may reasonably be expected to have the knowledge and subject upon which a person is qualifying a certified engineer over the new territory required in 243-31 is accomplished according to the provision approving the continuing education of the railroad own program to develop a continuing education provision. Railroad will need to determine what kind of training, if any, with appropriate interest with such as the possible training of scenarios in the railroad part 240. FRA recommends the railroad part 240 program address to the possible training scenarios in which the engineer transferring to the territory demands greater training handling skills, transferring with the relatively flat territory to the mountainous territory, transferring the territory that allows for operation with extremely long trains where the engineer has never experienced before. The failure to address such scenarios may lead to the determination that program is deficient. Territorial qualification question 3. What are the requirements when the railroad wishes to requalify a certified engineer and physical characteristics with a territorial qualification experience expired or near expiration date? Alright, 3. What are the requirements for the regulations of the regulation when the railroad wishes to recertify a certified engineer and physical characteristics for the territory engineer has previously been territorially qualified but have either allowed his or her qualification to expire according to the railroad program's nearest of the expiration date? The regulation requires Section 240-123B of the railroad address for the concern with the engineer's knowledge of the particular territory being to erode over time with the failure to have an adequate procedure for the continuing education with the violation of the section when the railroad has previously determined the engineer is qualified to operate over the particular territory. FRA has permitted each railroad to address for the subject continuing education certification program field pursuant with the Part 240 and Appendix B. Part 240 the FRA makes it clear that each railroad program must address familiarization training with the engineers who have been away from the territory for some time with the territories have been changed. Railroads have to fill with the obligation with the require the engineers to requalify for the territory have a specified period of time has elapsed, but under no circumstances may a railroad wait longer than 36 months. Alright, territorial question 3. What are the requirements when the railroad wishes to requalify a certified engineer physical characteristics territory qualification expired nearing expiration date? It requires engineer territorial qualification interval recertification that can exceed 36 months. Although a railroad could treat a previously territory qualified engineer as it does previously untrained person, see answer question 1. Certified engineer who has never operated over the territory, see answer question 2. FRA's policy permit the railroad to perform a less formal process as long as its process is clearly articulated in accordance with the railroad part 240 program. Territorial qualifications question 4. What if there's a disagreement between the engineer and designated supervisor or locomotive engineer concerning the engineer's territorial qualifications? Question 4. What is the procedure if there's a disagreement between the engineer and designated supervisor or locomotive engineer concerning the engineer's territorial qualification? In other words, for the party for the responsible for the designated locomotive engineer believe the engineer's territorial qualified by the engineer believes otherwise. Answer 240-231A. Experiments of the engineer for the operating over the territory not qualified and physical characteristics under the section FRA could have a hold railroad official for the engineer individual liability in addition with holding the railroad liable. Railroad may not order a person who is territorial unqualified to operate a locomotive within train in the territory, likewise with the engineer who operates over the territory in which he or she with the unqualified physical characteristics facing the FRA enforcement is proceeding, civil penalty, disqualification, safety sensitive services, etc. Or in some circumstances the railroad official such as the designated supervisor, locomotive engineer, and engineer may disagree with whether the engineer's territorial qualified. Dispute with them may be resolved with a check from the territorial record kept for this engineer to see if the person was initially qualified properly over the 240-213B. The check from the engineer certify who forget to see if it indicates the territory on which the engineer is qualified, determining whether the designated supervisor or local manager determine the engineer to be qualified on this territory since his or her initial certification 240-123B. If the railroad cannot determine one of these means for the engineer qualified on the term, the FRA strongly recommend the railroad not order the engineer to operate a train under the such circumstance. Order an operator to operate a train when the railroad has no basis for believing the engineer's territorial qualified. You, the result of the FRA, taking enforcement action on 240-231A against the railroad over the officials approved as such. In order such to turn out the engineer was in fact not qualified. In addition, the engineer certification actually contained the territorial restriction railroad required the engineering to perform service beyond the specified certification. Limitation of this action would be also violate 240-305 C. Of course, the FRA decision was whether enforcement action is warranted and will be so on the fact of specifically of each incident. Please note that the engineer is not territorial qualified. Railroad may permit train movement with the engineer pilot pursuant with the 240-231 with the considered the qualified pilot will depend on the experience of the engineer specified in the next section of this regulation. Alright, territorial qualifications. Question 5. What degree of knowledge and skills must the designated supervisor or locomotive possess to the test for the qualified engineer over his or her assigned territory? Okay. These degree of knowledge skill tests of the designated supervisor or locomotive possess for the test for qualified engineers over his or her assigned territory. The answer is the regulations outlines the designated supervisor locomotive engineering requires 240-115B. Railroad should examine any person considering the qualification as of the designated supervisor or locomotive engineer to determine that he or she has knowledge or understanding of the requirements of Part 240. Can appropriately test evaluate the knowledge and skills of a locomotive engineer has the necessary supervisor experience to prescribe the appropriate remedial action noted deficiency within training the knowledge and skill of the person seeking to obtain retain certification, certified engineer who qualified physical characters of the portion of the railroad which the person will perform the quality of the designated supervisor locomotive engineer. Alright, compliance with these requirements will ensure that the designated supervisor locomotive will be responsible for the qualified engineer specific to the territory will be for the proficient engineers to perform the basic duties of the supervisor designated supervisor locomotive engineer to lack the knowledge and skills regulated required for the engineers who operate specifically the territory of the person shall not be the designated supervisor locomotive engineer. FRA intends strictly and enforce these requirements of the regulation and ensure that each designated supervisor locomotive engineer qualified to perform his or her supervisory duties. Alright, FRA notes that it's possible that alone designated supervisor locomotive that perform required testing qualifying with both physical characteristics as well as performance simultaneously. However, the railroad that wishes to enjoy an advantage of the combining the requirements must use the designated supervisor locomotive engineer who is qualified the physical characteristics of the territory over which the test will be conducted compared to 240-213B3 requiring qualified designated supervisor locomotive determined upon the completion of the training with the performance performally with the physical characteristics of the railroad and pertain with the segments 240-127C with explaining the skill performance of it does not require a designated supervisor locomotive of the engineer qualified with the physical characteristics of the territory over which the test will be conducted. Additional requirement of annual operation performance monitoring explicit with all the railroad programs containing procedure to permit the designated supervisor locomotive engineer conduct the monitoring in every event, even if the designated supervisor locomotive is not qualified in physical characteristics of the territory over the operational performance monitoring conducted within 240-129C2. Question 6. Under what conditions can an engineer operate over the territory on which he or she is not qualified? Question 6. Under what condition can an engineer operate the territory on which he or she is not qualified? At the threshold of the issue, it's important to distinguish between whether the engineer is in question is operating joint operation or territory or not. If the engineer is operating a joint operation territory over which he or she is not qualified, the engineer could operate a locomotive or a train. With a qualified person as a pilot, pursuant to 240-229E, the qualified person is defined in the section meet either the designated supervisor, locomotive engineer, or certified train service engineer determined with the controlling railroad to have the necessary knowledge concerning the controlling railroad operating rules, have the necessary operating skills, including familiarity with physical characteristics concerning joint operation territory, or with qualified pilot pursuant to 240-229F as long as the minimal joint operations involved with the minimal joint operations defined in this section. Most commonly, railroad may have the need of the territorial unqualified engineer to operate the locomotive, train, and other joint operation territory like a railroad's option. When an engineer is operating a joint operation territory, some circumstances does not require a pilot, but other similar situations do, who may serve as a pilot, and when a pilot is unnecessary are specifically addressed in 240-231. See information U of the pilot, page 216 of certificates and pilots tab. Or denial of recertification. Railroad shall not notify a candidate if the name of the rate is the base of the denial, provides a person responsible the opportunity to explain and rebut within writing prior to the denial. So based solely on the factors of the motor vehicle record, operating rules, and alcohol, drug compliance, note the denial, given the date with explain the base of the written mail delivery in 10 days. Alright, denial certification. Railroad shall notify the candidate of certification, recertification information shown by the railroad that form of the basis of the denial of the person certification provided with the person with a reasonable opportunity with explain with a rebut with adverse information with the written prior to the denying with the certification 242-19 but does not require further opportunity to commit if the railroad denial is based solely on the factors described in 240-115, 117, and 119 motor vehicle record operating rules, compliance, alcohol, drug compliance with the opportunity with the commented for by these sections have been provided. If it denies the person's certification, recertification, railroad shall notify the person of first decision explaining in writing of the basis of the denial decision, documented explaining with the basis for the denial shall be made and delivered to the person within 10 days after the railroad decision shall give the date of that decision. And then it goes over some comment letters. More comment letters. Alright, revocation.